The Trump administration is considering declaring a national housing emergency here.
I just can't see how people with a normal job making $15 an hour can afford an apartment without multiple roommates.
Sales price for a home has gone up 89%. Rental rates have almost doubled in some cases.
The real estate market is in the doldrums. Do you see any signs of life?
Growing up, I always thought that buying a home was just something that was part of adulthood. My parents did it, my grandparents did it, but now that I'm growing up, it feels almost impossible. It feels like the rules have changed in society as we were growing up, and nobody told us before. It kind of just slapped us in the face. Is the white picket fence, the 2-car garage, the idea of stability and independence. It was probably one of the #1 symbols that you made it. Even today, there's some surveys out there that show that nearly 3/4 of Americans out there, they still believe that owning a home is part of the American dream. But the one problem is that for us younger generations, it feels less like a dream and just feels like more of a cruel joke kind of for us. Our parents and grandparents lived in a completely different reality. If you were a baby boomer or even part of Gen X, homeownership was practically guaranteed for you. Wages were higher relative to housing costs, mortgages were cheaper, and a factory job or a middle-class job could, provide enough income to support almost a whole family on a single salary. For many, a modest paycheck could cover mortgage, kids, and probably even leave money for vacations. But you fast forward to today, and things are just so much more different. We probably are one of the first generations in history expected to do worse than our parents. It was always promised to us that if we studied hard, we went to college and worked our way up, we'd get the same reward as every generation before us, and that would include a home, a family, just a stable life. But honestly, this promise turned out to be arguably one of the biggest lies I think we were ever told. And I don't think it was on purpose, but growing up, as things have changed in society, we definitely have been almost slapped in the face. That's at least what it feels like. But I think the question to be asked is, what happened from when we were kids to now in the present when we are adults? I actually found a kind of an interesting stat online, but between 2010 and 2022, US home prices actually rose about 74%, while the average wages only rose about 54%. And this growing gap between what people earn and what homes cost is probably one of the clearest signals of why affordability just has spiraled out of control. Another way to see this is through the home price to income ratio, which was a ratio that was made up by Harvard State of the Nation's housing report, and they found this ratio to be 4.1 in 2019, and by 2020 it had risen to 5.6. And this actually marked one of the sharpest increases that I think that has ever been recorded. And obviously this has to do with the COVID pandemic. Obviously everything went out of control during that time, and especially housing just absolutely decimated the market. And not only do we see an increase of housing prices, but we've also seen an increase in our generations and even some generations now basically competing against corporations that are buying single family homes and then renting out these single family homes back to us citizens who are trying to afford these areas. And it just feels so backwards that a multi-billion-dollar corporation is able to come into an area. They can buy up, the supply of homes. They can kind of artificially just spike the demand in the area to be low and just shoot up housing prices and then rent it back. And then people get priced out, and then no one can afford to rent. It boggles my mind that this even exists right now. On top of rising prices and pandemic-driven demand, corporate entities are actually increasing their control on single-family rental markets. They have purchased probably hundreds of thousands of homes nationwide. And actually, private equity firms are estimated to own more than 500,000 homes across the US, and they are projected to control 40% of the single-family rental market by 2030. And in many markets, homes that would once have been starter properties for families are now long-term rentals controlled by investors, which further limits opportunities for first-time buyers. And I know we've also seen the memes where we, as a younger generation, we were trying to buy a home from some sort of boomer, but they don't want to give it to the family in need who is trying to buy the home. Instead, they'll go with the corporate buyer versus, the local families. But there's something I want to do is to kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture of this, and what does this mean almost for our society as a whole. Not only our society, I mentioned this as the perspective from the United States, but I know this is happening even across, globally, different places in the world. So it feels like it's affecting just a lot of people. But I kind of want to talk about the consequences of this, is this idea that we have this delayed independence and we have less mobility to move up in the world for ourselves. People can't move for jobs or opportunities because the cost of housing is it's too high, and it doesn't make any sense to move to these areas when, even though you may have an increased paycheck, all your money is going to go toward your housing. Not only that, but another trend is that a lot of families are being delayed. So if people do want families, this idea is probably being thrown out the window entirely, or just being super delayed just because of it feels as if it's a kind of a hurdle we have to jump over, is just trying to survive just by housing, just affording housing. It's really pushing everything back, it feels like. Not only that, but I worry about that if it's contributing to declining birth rates and it's changing kind of the structure of our society. Obviously, Gen Z is known as, generation of mental health disorders. So I really wonder if this sense of kind of this hopelessness, the sense of being robbed of our future that was promised to us. We were robbed, a stability that prior generations could, be able to grab, and now we no longer had the ability to kind of reach out and get the same thing. I also fear that there's a creeping sense of this topic or idea of what's the point of working harder to barely afford to live? Why work harder when I can't even do anything with that hard work? I'm forced to spend all my time working, and then all my money goes straight to this person and owning this house, groceries over here, and then you're left with basically nothing to do, no money to spend. And so the promises that were handed to previous generations of home ownership, financial security, and the ability to start and build a family, it feels as if that has been stolen from us. Many people in our generation may feel, or they may be disincentivized from striving to, perform better in the workplace, because the goals that we were once promised as kids or we thought were achievable seem to be almost impossible right now. This isn't just frustrating, but it's also kind of a scary thought too. When you have people working tirelessly, but they struggle to afford even the basics just to live, and when our independence and security are delayed even further, the incentives for us to work harder or to achieve certain things, I feel, begins to erode, because it feels like, what's the point? So the housing crisis in this sense isn't just a personal or economic issue. It's a generational challenge that I think could shape the trajectory of our society for decades to come if something's not done about it. But what do we do now? Do we just accept this system that we've kind of been thrown into without, any thought for us? Or what exactly do we do? Do we resign ourselves to a future where kind of home ownership is out of reach for most of us? Or do we push for a change? Do we try to enact policies that limit corporate control of single family homes? Do we have zoning reforms that allow more housing to be built, multifamily housing? Do we employ financial strategies to kind of restore fairness in the housing market? At the heart of it all, the question is, if owning a home is no longer possible for most of our generation, then what kind of future are we actually working toward? I think it really is about refusing to accept the future that's been laid out for us, that was stolen from us as well. And we need to ask ourselves what society do we want to build? What foundations do we want to lay for us to reach that stability that feels no longer within reach?